All right, hi guys. Sorry that I'm gone again. Obviously, this was not kind of in my plans. I was actually going to be gone for a cross country conference, and then my daughter got sick, and so now I'm home with her again, just so to handle any rumor control. She does not have COVID, and I will be back with you whether you like it or not on Monday. And so hopefully I'll get to see you soon. Um, so you should have done your vocab already. Hopefully you guys took care of that and submitted that. And so today, this is the last real day of of first semester, right? Next week is supposed to be like the week before exams, but for us in this class, you know that it is the week of exams. And so for you guys, on Thursday, I'm going to give you the three different essay choices that you'll have to choose from. Obviously, it'll be a synthesis essay, a rhetorical analysis essay, or an argument essay. I'm going to give you all three of them, all of them relating to Into the Wild. So please make sure that you bring that book with you. And then, that's going to be due by your exam period. And if you turn it in before the exam period starts, then obviously you don't have to show up. But it'll be a 40-minute style essay in, I think you'll have 5 days. It ends up to work on it, right? And so obviously that is next Thursday, right? Then on the Monday before exams actually begin, that's when you're going to take the full AP practice multiple choice. So it's 60-minute tests to take 45 multiple choice questions. We've talked about it before. We're going to practice one of them on Tuesday. And so all of next week is going to be actually, prep for and then taking the exam. And then we'll take the exam period off. You'll have a fresh start when we come back during the second semester. And by that point, you should have all the skills at least practice. And then we'll work on practicing and practicing and practicing them during that second semester. So that's kind of the way that it looks. Today, though, like I said, on the last day of our essay unit, I actually have a little project that I'm going to work on with you, or I guess get you guys to start working on. This piece by Martin Gansberg, which you should have just taken a few minutes, 1 or 2 minutes, to chat with each other about what the purpose was. And when we read pieces like this, now my expectation is that you can rattle off that rhetorical analysis stuff super quickly, right? You're able to come up with what is the purpose, what are a few different devices that the author uses. You should be able to do that in about 10 minutes, because to write a 40-minute essay, you've got to read it, annotate it, analyze it, plan it, outline it, write it, all six of those things in those 40 minutes. And so this really skeletal planning stage should take you about 10 minutes. And so I ask that you chat with each other for about a minute or two about what you think Gansberg's purpose was. It obviously goes beyond just informing people, the populace, people of New York, about the details of the case, and it had to become something much larger. And so normally I'd ask you then to share that with me, and I'll tell you whether you're right or wrong. But instead, I'm just going to walk through it with you on the computer here. And so I typed all the things up instead of expecting you to see what's on the board. So let me go ahead and pull that open. So the purpose that I wrote was that Martin Gansberg wrote 38 Who Saw Murder to encourage his readers to cast off their apathy and act in situations that require intervention. So it might be a little wordy, but my main purpose is, and my main point is, that Gansberg wrote this piece to inspire some change in his audience, right? And we'll talk about what some of these different strategies are, but his main point or his main purpose was to get people to not witness a murder and ignore it, to not practice that apathy, to step up and to help their fellow man or fellow woman in this case here. And so the question then becomes, what is Gansberg doing in order to make people change, or in order to make us as readers want to change as well? And again, we can go back to my purpose statement. I said that his goal was to encourage. You could use a totally different infinitive verb, right? You could say that his goal was to provoke change. You could say that his goal was to force change. You could say that his goal was to guilt readers into changing. Whatever the verb is doesn't really matter, as long as it's something better than to inform or to show, which we've talked about before. But the goal of changing the way that people respond in situations like this, that's fairly obvious, right? That's something that you should pull away from this. So then the question becomes, what strategies does he use, and how do those make his audience want to change? And so one of the first things I noticed was he uses brutal details about the attack. And so you can talk about how he talks about how she was stalked and how she was stabbed and that she was bleeding and crawling and pleading. He uses all of those words that really make for a vivid image that should horrify us as readers, right? He talks about how she screams, he's stabbing me. Will anybody help me, right? I'm dying, I'm dying. And the details that he shares obviously make us much more emotional. They make us much more maybe disgusted by the attack and should maybe move us to protect her more, right? The fact that we see almost an image of her suffering play out, he's calling on our humanity to make us want to act in a similar situation. Another one that I thought that he used was this very clear time frame, right? He said the attack started at 3:21. He came back and attacked again at 3:25. He came back again for a final time at 3:45, and that's ultimately what killed her. And it wasn't until 4:30 that the ambulance came. And he gives us that very clear time frame and always comes back to it. And he even tells us at the end that when somebody finally did call the police, the ambulance was there in just 2 minutes, right? And he gives us this time frame to show us and to make us recognize that if somebody would have acted, the simple task of calling the police, they would have arrived and prevented that murder from taking place, right? So the clear time frame, it shows how easy that action could have been. And if we recognize how easy it is, it'll make it much easier for us to act in the future. I thought that, he uses sarcastic descriptions of, the people standing by and watching. He said that they were good people and used quotation marks around it and law-abiding citizens. And I think the reason that this is so important is he frames these people as villains, or he frames these people almost as, I think, horrid and disgusting. And what that does for us as readers is we don't want to identify with those people. And so we don't want to be disgusting. We don't want to be disappointing. We don't want to be inhumane. And so if we want to differentiate ourselves from those people, we have to act, right? So he vilifies them to make us more inspired to be better than they were. He uses Kitty Geneviese's nickname instead of just calling her Catherine, instead of just calling her Ms. Genovese, or instead of just calling her a 28-year-old female, he calls her Kitty throughout the piece, I think to humanize her so that we develop a connection and we wish we could have saved her. He uses details of the neighborhood, like the cost of the homes, which seemed pretty horrid. He says the homes were anywhere from like $30,000 to $55,000, and buying a house for that much would basically net you nothing. Certainly not any property with a roof. But you have to remember this was written in 1964. And so if you count for inflation, these homes were like $300,000 to like $550,000. And so he's telling you this is a great neighborhood. It's stayed, it's calm, it's tree lined. And if a murder can happen here, it can happen anywhere. Obviously, kind of instilling some fear in his audience. And if he makes you afraid that something like this could happen in your neighborhood, you'll want to be proactive, right? You'll want to act and call on anything that you think is suspicious to keep yourself safe, I think. He provides positive consequences constantly. He says if one person would have done something, this girl would still be alive. And by providing that positive consequence, he certainly shows us that our actions would result in saving this girl's life. And if that doesn't make you want to act more, then I don't know what would. He shares the bystanders' excuses to further vilify them. And he also uses an appeal to authority, right? Even the police recognize that these people's inhumanity is what cost this girl her life, right? And so I know that, if I was there with you and asking you to come up with these, it might take a little bit longer because, I got to wait for you to raise your hands. But as you're sitting in your desk getting ready to write an essay, I think you can come up with this list fairly quickly, right? Then you can whittle it down and talk about, okay, which of these three do I think are the most important in helping Gansberg achieve what he's going to achieve? I could say, okay, use the rest of the hour, write a rhetorical analysis right now, and I know that you all could do that. But I want to do that third option, that third question that we haven't spent a lot of time on, because Gansberg makes a pretty bold claim by saying, if you witness a crime or if you're in a situation where you could help somebody who's in danger, He says, if you don't act, then you're a terrible person. Then you're inhumane, that you're horrid. And you may agree with that, but there is an alternative, right? There is a disagreement to be had, because if you put yourself in front of a murderer and his victim, you put yourself in harm's way. So to say a person who acts in their own self-interest and who, keeps themselves out of danger is horrible and inhumane, I think there's an argument to be had there. And so a lot of the time when we read these, we're focusing on the other author's purpose, but we never think what our own reaction would be. And that's where these argument questions come in. So I'd like you to go ahead and pause this video for as long as it takes to hand out this sheet. But I want you guys to look at what I call the REHUGO assignment. So pause. All right, so now that the sheet has been handed out, let's go ahead and talk about this, right? As you can see, this walks you through a project, and it's a project that I'm going to ask you guys to complete as your assignment. You'll have hopefully a good amount of time in class here to work on it, and then you'll have over the weekend. The project itself is going to be due on Tuesday at midnight. Hopefully you'll be able to finish it before then, and you won't have to really worry about that. There's actually only supposed to be 6 slides, so I'll change that while I'm on here. So the open-ended argument question, I think, is one of the best questions, because it asks you a really philosophical question that you have to really think and dig deep about. But when they ask you to dig deep and then give you a 40-minute time limit, it creates a little bit of tension and a little bit of a problem there. And so it can be a little bit tricky in that regard, but the open-endedness of it, I think, is beautiful, right? They'll ask you a philosophical question, and then your position is the only thing that matters. It's your opinion, your perspective, your stance on the issue, but then you have to go about proving that stance. And the reason that I think that this is fairly difficult is they don't give you any research to fall back on. They don't give you the ability to do research on the spot. So all of the information has to come from your own experiences in your own mind. And a lot of the time there's this paralysis that happens with that, where you feel like, I don't know anything. I don't have any outside information. I don't have any knowledge base. And so what I have for you here is an acronym, just like Soapstone, right? And you guys were able to use Soapstone pretty effectively. In fact, I bet if I asked all of you what Soapstone stands for, I bet you could get it with 90% accuracy. Maybe you'll forget what that second S is, but I think that you'll probably be okay. Soapstone helps us to understand and identify the rhetorical situation, the confluence of events that affects a writer as they write. But I have another acronym for this open-ended argument, and it's called REHUGO. It should be written on my board over here, and it's written for you right on the sheet that I have in front of me and that you should have in front of you. REHUGO gives you categories that you should access information from. If you take a stance on an issue like that Oscar Wilde one that we did, is disobedience a good virtue? You have to be able to cite different sources to be able to talk about different pieces of proof from your own experiences. When we did that, it was mostly like any war ever, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, Rosa Parks. A lot of those were because we had just read pieces, but some of them also crept in from your study of history. And that's exactly what I want you guys to be able to do, right? To take what you've learned in this class, to take what you've learned in history, to take what you've learned in psychology, in chemistry, all those different types of things, and be able to allow them to coalesce into proving your point. So REHUGO is meant to kind of help you with that. So each letter stands for a different category. So R is the easy one, stands for reading. And so any reading that you've done can be cited as a source here, right? So if you want to talk about something that happens in Night, if you want to talk about something that even happens in a fictional book like To Kill a Mockingbird, if you want to talk about something that happens in an essay that we've read, or if you want to talk about something that happened in your reading for Pogo or for psychology, you certainly can, right? That's a pretty easy one that I don't think you really need help identifying. But as you move beyond your reading, the E stands for entertainment. This is why I deal so much with talking about songs that teach lessons or make connections to some of the text that we're dealing with. So you can talk about how an artist speaks about the same idea in the song that he or she wrote. You can talk about things that are tackled in films and movies, right? You can talk about things that are happening in pop culture with celebrities and with fashion and with trends, those different types of things. So entertainment, it opens that world beyond just your reading and might take some of your interests to heart. If you're a really big, basketball fan, maybe something that LeBron James said could be something that you cite as a big entertainment figure. Clearly, history is something that's important as well. Again, this can be historical figures, it can be historical happenings or events. It could be religious history that you bring into it as well, but it's just another category for you to look at. The universal truths is one that I think is a little bit more lacking or a little bit more difficult to come up with, right? Unless you have like a cheesy grandparent who's always giving you, one-liner pieces of advice, it's hard to have a lot of these at the ready. But Ben Franklin was very famous for them. He called them aphorisms, like an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? Eating healthy will keep you healthy. A rolling stone grows no moss, right? If you're always keeping yourself active, there won't be things to weigh you down or cover you up, right? But those universal truths are these quotes that have, a strong meaning behind them. And those can help you to kind of prove the point that you want to make. Government is another one that I think is important. If you're in Pogo right now, Mr. Wolf is a rich resource of all these different types of things, but you can use laws, you can use Supreme Court cases, you can use, government officials or types of government that exist, like communism or democracy or republic, all those different types of things. But if you can come up with an actual law that's been written that backs up your position on an issue, that's a super, super, super strong way to help support the position that you're taking. And then the last one that I have for you is simply observations. This is my least favorite because it's very insular and can show that you don't have a super expansive knowledge base. But sometimes observations can be super beneficial. And what observations means is it's just personal experience that you have with an issue. So if the argument is, should schools require uniforms? If you went to a school where you had to wear a uniform, absolutely you should talk about your own experience. But if all three of your body paragraphs are personal stories about things you've experienced, it's going to make your article subject to incredible bias. And it's also going to make it incredibly one-dimensional, right? And so the key thing about the REHUGO is it allows your proof, it allows your evidence to be expansive, right? It's not all just coming from reading. It's not all just coming from history. It's coming from all of these different places throughout. And if you can vary your evidence, it's going to make your point seem that much clearer. So this REHUGO is just a guide to help you know what to look for or what where to go to think of some examples. Now, the way that you're going to apply it is to the questions that come up with that open-ended argument. So Martin Gansberg said that if you don't help someone in need, you're a terrible person. And you can agree with that or you can disagree with that. But I think there's an argument to be had. So here's the actual question. And this part right here that I'm highlighting, this is what an AP argument question, a number 3, this is what it'll look like. It'll be that small, and then it'll ask you to churn out an entire essay based on your stance and your experiences. So let me just read this to you and make sure you guys know what I'm asking of you. It says, this assignment is going to ask you to create an argumentative presentation tied to our experience with Martin Gansberg's 38 Who Saw Murder. So instead of writing an essay, you're just going to create a PowerPoint that kind of outlines what that essay would look like. I have an example for you on the Google Classroom. I'm going to show you one in just a second here too. But that's going to be kind of the output of what you create. Your presentation should answer the following question. It says, famed English author and social critic Charles Dickens writes, "No one is useless in this world who lightens the burdens of another." The AP is always going to do this, where they'll give you a quote and then they'll ask you to respond to that. So Dickens says, "No one is useless who lightens the burdens of another." Basically, your usefulness comes from your ability and your willingness to help other people. So then they'll always clarify and actually ask the question. It says, consider the value that Charles Dickens places on helping others. Then write an essay in which you develop your own position on Dickens' declaration. In short, answer this question. Is it our responsibility to help others? Right now, I want you to answer that question. Is it our responsibility to help others? And I want you to say yes or no right now. You may change your mind in the future as you start to think of claims, but right now, I want you to come up with an answer. Yes or no. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, if you said yes, your responsibility is to prove to me why we should help others. Not only why is it our responsibility, but why is it good to help others? What will we gain from it? If you said no, I want you to prove to me why shouldn't we help others, right? What might it cause? What detriments might it cause for us? Once you make a decision on that question, the rest of your essay becomes simple. Everything about your essay is proving why your stance is correct for me as a reader. So like it says, right? Instead of writing an essay, you will create a PowerPoint presentation that presents all of the elements of REHUGO. Here are the requirements right here, but instead of just focusing on that, I'm going to show you my example. So hopefully you can see this. Here's my title slide. I've got this quote, right? Are they my poor? It's an entire question about should we help the people who are in need. I used a quote from our boy. Anybody know who said this? Are they my poor? Sometimes I confess I give the wicked dollar. Emerson? Emerson said that. Hopefully you all said it. Everybody cheer now. Nice work. Emerson said, are they my poor? And he answered that they're not. I'm not responsible for them. Let's see if that's what I came up with. I want you guys to try to come up with one of those inverted pyramid introductions. There's a lot of text here, but with your introduction, I want you to be able to rattle this off fairly quickly. I've given you guys a couple different examples of these, and you may notice I always use the same start. I always start with, there's this question, this existential question that people have asked since the beginning of time, and it's, what is our purpose? And even though I use it for every single essay and it starts to become old and trite and a little bit mundane, the AP is only ever going to look at one essay that you write. And so, or I guess one of each type of essay. And so if you use this, they're only going to really see it once, maybe maximum 3 times. And so if it works, it works. So here's my blah, blah, blah. Everybody, asks the question, what is our purpose, right? Right here, I connect it to the prompt, right? Charles Dickens believed that life in service to others is a life well lived. And now here's my thesis statement. Here's my point that I'm trying to make. When considering self-sacrifice and understanding, the brotherhood of mankind, it is clear to see that it is our moral responsibility to help those in need. So my thesis is, yes, we must help others. So the rest of my essay and the rest of my presentation has to speak to that. So I want you guys to come up with, and this is a little bit more than an outline, but basically it's not a full essay. I want you to create a PowerPoint, a slide for each of the different REHUGO points. On that slide, I want you to have a claim that proves, hey, why is it a good thing to help other people? If you agree with me, if you take that stance, right? If you're saying that helping other people is not required, it's not our responsibility, and it's not good, then your claims should be reasons why we shouldn't or we don't need to help other people. But I want you to come up with a claim, and I want you to come up with an example that fits under that REHUGO category. So if I'm asking you to come up with 6 different claims, is there a chance that some of them, that all 6 of them aren't going to be super great? Yeah. Is there a chance that some of your claims might sound a little too similar? Yeah. But I want you to try and come up with as many different unique claims as you can, so that ultimately, if you have to whittle this down to only 3 for an essay, that you can choose the best 3. So I know I'm asking kind of a lot of you, but again, I'm recognizing that there might be a little bit of similar ground that you tread. Like, look at mine, right? My first claim is that living selfishly can lead humanity down a dark path. If we don't live for other people, then we're going to ultimately lose our humanity. And what book better proves that than Lord of the Flies? So here's a little bit of explanation about how I'm going to use Lord of the Flies as my example. And that's all I need for this slide. I've got the beautiful pictures here. They're not required for your project, but they'd make it look a lot nicer. For my second one, I say a commitment to others can lead to social change. So if we live and if we help other people in need, it can move our society together and allow it to progress. I use these lovely "We Are the World" example right here to show that when stars come together, when people work together, that it can raise awareness and push our society to make progress. Whether it's true or not, whether you agree or not, I'm trying to use this example to help to prove my point. My history example, look at my claim, right? Apathy and indifference can have disastrous consequences. So if we don't help other people, it can lead to negative consequences. Is that different from this point that I'm talking about here? Not really, but that's where I'm talking about how you might run into a little bit of sameness with your claims. But here I use neutral countries during World War II. My next one, universal truth. Self-sacrifice can be personally rewarding. Self-sacrifice can help you to feel better about yourself. For my next one, the law recognizes responsibility we have as citizens, so it's legally required of us. I think that's a pretty important thing. If you wanted to talk about financially, how helping another person can help you with your taxes, that's another claim that you could make as well. And then finally, this last one, right? Adopting a philosophy of moral responsibility can strengthen the bonds of a neighborhood, can bring you closer to the people around you. So I'm trying to come up with as many different claims as I can. And for each claim, I'm giving an example that corresponds to the category of REHUGO. So what I want you guys to do, you all have access to this example. It's on the Google Classroom. I want you to make a copy, and you can use my format to create your own. This process is super helpful to you when crafting an argument essay, because it'll help you to understand where to look for the evidence that's required. And remember, the AP and I always get after you about using specific evidence. And in this, when you're not allowed to use research, or where you're not allowed to have the book in front of you, you can't use an exact quote or an exact statistic. And so instead of saying many books talk about the danger of society or the dangers of humanity or the dangers of selfishness, instead you can give a specific book that you've read. And so this becomes much easier the more knowledge, the wider spread you have. But that's why we read Into the Wild. That's why we read Emerson and Thoreau. That's why we read The Perils of Indifference. That's why we read the I Have a Dream speech. I'm trying to expose you to as many of these things as I possibly can to get you to work on these things. So I want you guys to take the rest of the hour to work on this. And you can chat with each other. You can share ideas with each other. You can share claims with each other. But I want each of you to craft your own presentation that walks me through the REHUGO answer to this question. This is going to be due, like I said, on Tuesday at midnight. And so I'm hoping you'll have at least or about 40 minutes in class today to work on it. This is basically the brainstorming session for a 40-minute essay. So all of this should be able to be done in 40 minutes, but that's happening in your head. So I recognize that it's a little bit more to actually put it on, a PowerPoint. And so you've got the rest of today to work on it, and it's going to be due on Tuesday at midnight. You won't have class time, I don't think, on Tuesday to work on it, so don't count on that. But this will be that last assignment of, I was going to call it the regular season. This is the last assignment for regular class before the finals start next week. So any questions, please email me. Otherwise, I hope to see you back in person and actually, talking with you and teaching you next week on, what day will that even be? On Tuesday is when I'll see you again. All right. Have a good weekend. Stay healthy. See you guys soon.